Hello and welcome to episode 32 of the Teachers Tea Time podcast. My name is Mark and I hope you're doing well. This podcast is about, by and for anyone who has ever had anything to do with schools and education. That's almost everybody. We are proud to be a member of Edjacent, a design collaborative that connects educators to their legacy. Learn more at edjacent.org. I have a mug of tea ready, so let's sit back, relax and get on with the show. In today's episode, we share another part of my conversation with Edjacent designer Jared Fritzinger. Last time we talked about his students' capstone project and how they conceptualized and then refitted an ecobus to help teach other schools about sustainability. If you haven't listened to episode 31 yet, I suggest that you do. It's a fascinating conversation. Today, though, we talk about how the ecobus project developed through the pandemic and how that and other capstone projects align to the true purposes of education. We also touch upon how the act of breaking boundaries is a key part of the good work that educators really should do.
Through that process. And so we got a lot of work done in that year too that was really brilliant work and really set us on the path that we're going to be. And then in the truncated pandemic year last year, we even went farther than that. We built the interior of the bus out of cardboard because year 3 became about space programming, like programming the space. My kids went down and got second graders and we built the space in the hallway out of cardboard and took those concept designs and started putting them in different spots. Like, where would this go? Where would that go? We started bringing kids from other grades up and studying movement through the space. How would they move through the space? How many people can you fit? So that led to my kids saying, well, maybe we need to, maybe we're thinking too much about the bus itself being the end all and be all. I said, okay, tell me more. And they said, well, it feels really weird that if we went to another school, particularly because a lot of talk that we had around this started centering on some Title I schools and stuff like that. They said it would feel really bad if we took this thing over there to their school and it was really shiny and cool. But then all of the kids, the kids that left, or once we left, the kids there, it's like we took the experience with us and it wasn't there anymore. They said, can't we figure out a way to and they also said, you can only have one class at a time on the thing. So even if we went there all day, you're not going to get all the kids in the school. Mm-hmm. You'd have to go multiple times. I said, yeah, and it would be good if we went multiple times. I said, but yeah, I get what you're saying. Where the experience maybe needs to be a little bit more immersive. So that led to them starting to figure out, are there things that we can do where we can turn the school into our own little sustainability playground with the bus as an anchor. So they started coming up with what are games that we can play in PE? Mm-hmm. What are things that we can do, here, there, and so that led to me finding great. And every time they come up with something oh, great, now I got to figure out how to make this happen. So I got some grant funding and I got thermal imaging cameras so they could run around school and do heat island effect. I got these solar powered boats so they could have boat races with these toys. I got this thing called a solar balloon that you run and you fill it with air. And then as it reacts with the sun, it gets all big. Whatever they could think of, I went and found it. You know what I'm saying? And so that really coalesced. I mean, they were onto some really good work right as the pandemic came in and totally destroyed their work. Yeah. Because they had really dug into this idea of what's the user experience of this thing going to be. And I've kept that work in mind, even though I lost those kids prematurely, because that work was really powerful. And so yeah, we were going to, what were we going to do? It was essentially what it came into is that, yeah, what we really want, what this experience needs to be is we bring the bus is the anchor, it's the wow factor. But then what we do is we spread out with these kids into their own school and show them that sustainability lives in everybody's space, in everybody's neighborhood. It doesn't matter, how big, small, poor, rich, whatever your school is, it still matters. And that actually led me being able to sit down, once the pandemic started and I had a chance to slow down, I started being able to think about maybe I'm thinking too small about the whole thing. So I started thinking about how many other areas can we serve that are like areas of need, identified need of the school system. So like community engagement, how many people don't have an entry point into school where maybe this could be an entry point? One of the things that made me think about that was like Title I has this sort of parental engagement piece to it. I was like, what if we were able to do workshops about sustainability at home with the bus? What if we were down at every festival in Virginia Beach, just being a presence for the school system, and not in this sort of like, looming sort of like, ooh, it's school way, but like, it's like, hey, this is something fun. What if we were collaborating with Parks and Recreation in the summertime for their summer camps and like giving them something else to do? So I thought about it. It's like you're filling an equity gap, you're addressing a community engagement gap. I said, you can use the thing as professional development. How fun would it be to have teachers come and get on the Children's Museum and like learn from people who have been doing sustainability education for 10 years, how to weave sustainability education into what you're doing? I mean, like real, actual good work. And so I started centering my focus on that. And so this year, luckily, the silver lining of the pandemic this year and not having students in class was like, I really needed a year to catch up and find them, like, start making some of these things happen, because the X factor in all of this has been money. So I was able to secure a $20,000 grant from the school system, from the Virginia Beach Education Foundation. I used that to get the exterior wrap put on it, because that exterior design really kind of makes it pop for people and makes it look real. So it got a vinyl exterior wrap of the kids' design. It's staggeringly beautiful. I was also able to get the solar company to come in and do all of the solar array and do all the interior electrical to make that happen. And then the big piece was that I got another $10,000 from a local charity called the Hanson Family Foundation. And that $10,000 went to a company in Buffalo, New York called Hadley Exhibits. They specifically do trade shows and children's museum exhibits. And I handed them all of the stuff that the children had come up with conceptually. And they've created for me essentially a set of really fleshed out concept designs. And have committed to working with my next cohort. So this next year's cohort of kids, our first big project is to take those conceptual designs, because Hadley's going to turn them into actual build plans and give me a number. How much money would it cost to actually build this thing on the bus? So the kids, they came up with 15 conceptual designs for the interior and like 6 for the exterior. The kids are going to have to like go through this process, whittle it down, and then Hadley's going to take them through the entire process of creating build schematics for this sort of stuff and really fleshing it out to the end, which I think is absolutely brilliant, invaluable work and worth every bit of time. And, so on our end, I'll still have HBA with me to help guide the kids on the ground while they're collaborating with this company in Buffalo, because it's a really specialized work. Like, who the heck builds children's museums on bus? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, so, I was like, I have no idea.
Do it, yeah.
So we've got that going for us. They're going to go through that process this year, where they actually go through that design process and they find out what are the grade 8 that are going to be on there. We've also we tentatively have 2 partnerships, one with the Virginia Marine Science Museum and the other one with Operation Smile, because that's how I got into Hadley. Was Hadley Exhibits came and did a complete redesign of the lobby of the Operation Smile building, where when you walk in, you're essentially doing an entire Operation Smile mission trip, but through the lobby. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And so they've both offered pretty extensive, so Virginia Marine Science Museum said that they would love to have the kids come over and show them how they program a space, thinking really about like what draws a person into an exhibit, how long do they stay at an exhibit, blah, 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 blah. How does that affect the way other people move through the space, because that's really important work when you're dealing with like 2nd, 3rd, 4th graders in a confined space, because a bus is pretty small when you get going with it. And then OpSmile's big thing is helping them with docent training, because OpSmile, like, you'll not find a better organization in terms of knowing how to reach out to people. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Absolutely, yeah.
So those opportunities are available too for the year, and so that's kind of where we are.
Wow.
As part of the as part of that process, and I'll still be facilitating other capstone projects, like whatever the rest of the kids are coming up with too. Like it deserves equal importance. Like the bus is something that's like an area of focus, and it's kind of my main area of focus, but like it's no more or less important than anything else that any of these other kids are coming up with. And that's the real secret, is to never make it look like the bus is the coolest thing and everybody else is doing crap, because they're not. Anything that one of these kids comes up with could be the next, great innovation. And so like, I have to walk that line of being able to, like, give them as much of my attention as well. So that's kind of where we are. It's staggering to think about.
It is. It is, but it's such a good example of the things that you can do when you allow the kids to be creative. I mean, you've already brought in community partnerships. You've got local architects. You've got people all around the country working. They're working with local experts. They're getting to see, how to get their hands dirty. They're thinking ahead. They're working with curriculum. They're doing planning that some teachers can't get their heads around, writing things in that UBD format and thinking about how to make things work. They're now looking at interdisciplinary learning. They're trying to make it a whole school experience. This is a really good example of using a capstone course to put together, what people call a real world application, of their learning. And it's meaningful too, because it's not just pretend. It's not, you're pretending to. This is something that's actually happening. And you've got a bus that works. You've got a bus that in maybe a year's time is ready to start taking to schools. It's going to be really good to see. And every cohort of kids that's worked on it, I was just thinking about this. They're going through high school. Some of those kids are in high school right now. They're going to graduate. In years down the line, they'll come back to the city and they'll see that bus and they go, I had a hand in doing that. And that's a connection to your own environment too. I mean,
they still engage now. I mean, I can call those kids anytime I want to, and they will do stuff for me. I have not been the boss of some of these kids for like 3 years, and like I can put out the call and they will come and do. I've actually got a group of my high schoolers right now. They've been sort of working in the background on this workbook to go with the kids' experience, like something that they can walk onto and off of the bus with, So, I mean, they're not getting a grade.
No, they're doing because it's worthwhile work. And that's the thing. And think how we could reimagine school if we made all the work worthwhile like that. I mean,
well, of course, because I mean, it speaks to a bigger piece about school. Like, so one of my best friends in the world, brilliant guy. He is the creative director of CarMax in Richmond, which is just the job he's choosing to do right now. But because he could do anything in the creative sector. But I mean, he said, he goes, I can't really. He goes, I know I learned stuff in public school, but I can't really think of like. He really thinks about starting his learning experience like at the age of 18. And it's like, well, probably because a lot of the stuff that you did was the basics and the rote, and like, yeah, you learned it and it was good for you to learn in a certain way, but like, did you necessarily have to learn all of it at that time in that, in that place, like I've never used algebra 2. Which is not to bust on algebra 2 teachers, because like now I'm older and I understand that there are like practical, creative, and facets to learning math, and there's a lot of critical thinking skills that go along with learning math, but at the mechanics of doing algebra 2 I've never done, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not necessarily always sure that I can pinpoint exactly what parts of math seeped in terms of that critical thinking. I wish I knew, because I'd love to be able to give more credit to some of these people who had to like deal with me in a math class. But I'm not sure.
It's the key to what we do as educators, though. I mean, when I talk to teachers and I talk to beginning teachers, one thing I always like to say, so why is it important that you're teaching this right now to this group of kids? And if they can't tell me why it's important, why it matters, why are they doing it? Because you're wasting your time, you're wasting the kids' time. And that's the heart of our curriculum. And yes, I mean, the standards we have, they're probably worthwhile to know and do, but how do we make it so we can know and do them so that they matter? And I think that's the key. So I mean, what you've got is a great example of that capstone project, and the students you have, whether it's the bus or something else, actually putting all this stuff they've done over the 8 years up to middle school into something that matters, and that renders school meaningful finally.
I think so too. I think that it makes them, well, it answers that question. It answers the big question that we've heard forever. Why?
Absolutely, yeah. Why
do this?
Why do this? And when I say to folks now, if you hear a kid asking you, is this for a grade, or why am I doing this? That's actually a really good question to ask, because what they're actually saying is, does this matter? And why should I get invested in this? And if you can't tell them, then we have a problem. It's a good question about learning. It's also, on a long day, where do I put my cognitive load? Do I really need to be focused on this piece of math you want me to do today, because I've got a test in something else later, and how can I do so much? And so, it really, really does speak to how we go about business, And
it caused me too, and the rest of, I still am charged with teaching a civics and economics course. And
absolutely.
It caused me to think about, and luckily I'm surrounded by colleagues that think the exact same way. It caused me to think about how can I produce why to a lot of things I produce in civics. So like my colleague, Kristen, who is my counterpart in civics, like this year, she actually was trying to answer the same question for herself. So like, we're going to step out on a limb this year. For instance, we're going to, you never see a book study outside of English, but we both were like, the judicial branch curriculum that we have to teach is so dry.
Oh gosh, yes.
And there are real significant issues with crime and punishment that everybody in America just sort of takes at face value. And so we found this beautiful opportunity where the kids are reading To Kill a Mockingbird, which, my critique of that book is pretty much that, like, what any critical thinker's critique would be is like, it's held up as like the great tome of, civil rights in America, but really it's presented from this idea of like, those poor white people, they had to be like adjacent to this awful crime that happened to this black man. And Atticus Finch is supposed to be a hero for doing like the basic functional job that a lawyer is supposed to do.
Absolutely.
And so like the kids read that story, and credit to our English teachers. They've been very contextual about that book in the past few years, because they'll always have the kids read another book that provides, like Brown Girl Dreaming or something that provides other context. But like, we're going to up at a level by trying to teach our entire judicial branch unit as a novel study of the book Just Mercy, which is perfect because the crime that's talked about in that book, this horrendous miscarriage of justice happened in Monroeville, Alabama, which is where To Kill a Mockingbird was written, or where it was set. And so it's like, it's a great juxtaposition. They'll be reading To Kill a Mockingbird at the same time that they're reading Just Mercy. And we get to speak about, but that only comes about because of having my eyes open to the idea that like, why is really important. Like, you can walk through the stuff about like, the Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, all the standard stuff in like a day if you really wanted to. But then like, let's talk about, the real serious issues. Like, is it cruel and unusual punishment to take a 13-year-old and sentence him to life imprisonment, which is something that's talked about in the book over and over and over again. Is it cruel and unusual to take a woman who is about to give birth, who's being incarcerated, and chain her to a hospital bed while she's, putting new life into this world? You know what I'm saying? Like, regardless of what she's done to offend society, still in that moment, she is a mother who's putting a new life into the world.
So fundamentally, what you're trying to do here is do what your teacher did many years ago. When they asked you, why are you using this word? Right? You're doing it with civics. And I think that's really, really key. And maybe this takes this whole conversation full circle. Because, you talked about that one teacher and the value of sort of music and punk rock, because you could break those boundaries a little bit. And there's a little bit of that going on in the sort of work you're doing too, because you're trying to, doing work in ways of pushing the boundaries.
teaching is more than delivering a whole bunch of knowledge for students to remember. Our world is complex and ever-changing, and I really appreciate Jared's approach to teaching from a boundary-breaking perspective. This shows how everything and everyone connects, and this can only be good for society in the long run. Anyway, if you want to connect to Jared directly, you can get in touch via Twitter at Jared Fritzinger or email him at jared@edjacent.org, and those addresses will be in the show notes. Next time, we're going to wrap up our conversation and talk about the idea of artists as educators. But until then, that was episode 32 of the Teachers Tea Time podcast. This podcast is a proud member of Edjacent, a design collaborative that connects teachers to their legacy. If you're looking for community, coaching, or content based around your needs, point your browser to www.edjacent.org and become a member for less than the cost of a pumpkin spice latte a week. So go ahead and navigate to www.edjacent.org and choose Become a Member. For me, it's the stories of teachers, students, and school communities that matter. As such, this podcast is only possible with the help and support of its listeners. Please leave positive reviews wherever you are able. If you're an iTunes or a Spotify subscriber, leaving a good review can really help our visibility. Also, please don't keep this podcast to yourself. Tell your friends to subscribe and listen too. One thing we all have in common is that we've all been to school. Everyone has an educational story to share. So if you would like to contribute to the pod in any way, if you have a story to share, long, short, tragic or comic, or if you have comments to make about the podcast or just want to say hi, you can send an email to teachersteatimepod@gmail.com. Or alternatively, you can send emails to me directly using mark@edjacent.org. I love to read what you have to say. If social media is your thing, you can follow me on Twitter @markdiakop. You can find our contact information, copies of show notes, and you can download previous episodes of the podcast at www.teachersteatimepod.com. The podcast artwork was created by Phaedra. Opening and closing music is by Bryan Boyko. It's been my pleasure to be your host today. Thank you for listening.